the incentives or the promotions that are being given to the entrepreneur is more of a valuable format. It needs to be pushed right from the beginning. Research and investigation are two factors that has to be given the topmost priority in our country. Programs and thought process have to be continuously through the radio, television and other mediums of publicity. Good morning and welcome to the fourth session in Unit 2 in Entrepreneurship and Small Business Management, where we are going to speak about the suggestions for entrepreneurship development in India. Now, the moment I talk about suggestions, these are something which are generic in nature. Of course, we can work on that and we can definitely improvise ourselves at any given point of time. So let's look at what are the suggestions that we have for the development or growth in India. The first one is industry-oriented planning altogether. Now, we believe that the industry orientation is mandatory for all of us. Why? Because when you look into the entrepreneurship development, it is quite closely related to the industries, which means to say that the efforts that has been put by young entrepreneurs today has to be recognized, has to be relevant enough. So that's why I would say that when you are looking into this entrepreneurship, you need to link it to the industry so that the entrepreneurs will also adopt those policies, those plans. They will understand how the business is moving, what are the changes that they need to bring in, what are the dynamics they have to adapt themselves to the workplace. Now, if you see here, there has been a rapid industrialization starting from the 1990s onwards. We have been slowly moving ourselves in terms of privatization, manufacturing, the services and other factors altogether. But the concept of entrepreneurship started picking up only in the late 2000s. That was about in 2005 onwards. We have become very interested in the entrepreneurial journey. Now, what is happening is that most of the entrepreneurs tend to take up this program, but they are not able to link themselves to a particular sector and understand the reality. So that's why we feel that when the economic development is on the progress, the entrepreneur should also be a part of this journey, where he should understand how exactly the changes are being spoken, where exactly they are bringing in the changes, where exactly they are trying to change the workplace methodologies altogether. Now, the next thing is that formation of favorable environment. Now, that is very important. Why? Because for an entrepreneur, the most important thing is the infrastructural facilities that needs to be developed so that entrepreneurship development can also be done. Now, many parts of India, we still ask this question, the land, electricity problem, the water problem, that still is there, and that is primarily because not that we have not planned, but it is all the factor that we have to still execute those plans. Now, what is happening is that since we know that 70% of India's population lives in the rural sector, we need to ensure that the rural India is covered with the electricity, water, raw materials and all the necessary infrastructure that is available so that the entrepreneurial journey becomes interesting. For many of them, what happens is the environment itself completely disturbs the ideology of entrepreneurship. And when you look at Bangalore, for example, the city of so-called as the Silicon Valley of India, with a bustling amount of IT companies in the city, modern malls, and there are a lot of shopping complexes, metros, and when you start seeing the whole city being so engrossed in terms of technology, in terms of shopping, in terms of lifestyle, automatically for any youngster, he gets carried away because that environment is inducing him to start something new there. He believes that this kind of city can promote his entrepreneurial journey furthermore. The moment when you land up in Mumbai, the amount of crowd, the amount of population, the speed at which the city moves suddenly starts making you feel that this is not actual India what I have seen. Because probably I'm coming up from a village, I'm coming up from a rural area where there are hardly people residing. People do things at their own pace and time. But when I move to a city like Mumbai, I suddenly start seeing that people are racing against the time. The city is so jam-packed. The city is running ahead in terms of business, in terms of money. So what is happening for me is that I want to be a part of this fast-paced life and journey. So that's exactly where I would like to say the environmental conditions will make the entrepreneurial journey even more exciting. People want to be a part of that exciting journey. They don't want to be a part of a place where there is a lackluster of the infrastructural facility, where there is no growth at all. So when you start talking about transformation, you need to understand that the transformation has to happen inclusive. It cannot be an exclusive transformation. You cannot just name out some 10 or 12 metro cities and say that India is well developed. India is well developed only when every city, town, village is also included in that process. So that's where the environmental setup will be equal, will be unilateral for all of us. So that is the most important thing for the entrepreneurial environment to pick up. Now, the social environment also, as we are speaking about, when you look at the metro cities, the connectivity in terms of living conditions is also quite rapid. See, when you are from a village and when you are from a city, the connectivity in terms of transportation, in terms of living, or in terms of getting a particular accessory or facility is very well connected in terms of a metro life. But in terms of village, there are sometimes when your social life is so affected that you try to live like in an island. So this is another factor which will actually demotivate an entrepreneur in terms of going back to the rural area and serving. So he wants to move to an urban area which is well connected, where the social life is engrossed in terms of activities, and then he is able to move forward. So this is where I say that the formation of favorable environment is a must for the entrepreneur. Moving forward, the facilities and incentives. What are the facilities and incentives that we provide to our entrepreneur? One side, we talk about the tax cut, we talk about, the special concessions and all those factors. But then what is exactly needed is that the identity for their innovation. Now, when you look at the special economic zones in India, or when you start talking about those highly industrialized, specialized zones which have been created in and around the big metros, what is more important there is that you are trying to push entrepreneurship to a level or to an extent. But the entrepreneurs, in order to establish there and start manufacturing and take it forward, is not going to be that easy. Reason being is that they would like to look at that zone as a targeted area where they feel that yes, they have been limited in terms of scope. They don't really get anything much beneficiary in nature, and they feel that the cost of establishment will also be very high. So when we talk about this incentives, when we talk about the benefits and development that has to be given to the entrepreneur, we actually need to get on to a factor where we give the entrepreneurs the source to raw materials, the inventory handling, the logistics and other part, which would be greater for their business to run smoothly. The most important thing is that not only the tax benefits we are talking about, but even their inventions, even their new models need to be patented, need to be given equal importance, and that needs to be marketed well so that they are able to recognize the revenue in the long run. For many of the entrepreneurs, what it happens is that somewhere they start the journey, they start going up the ladder, but suddenly they start feeling that they are not able to successfully withstand the pressure of the market. They are not able to continue their operation, so they have to go back. That should not happen after an entrepreneurial journey is started. So one should understand that the incentives or the promotions that are being given to the entrepreneur is more of a valuable format. It needs to be pushed right from the beginning so that as the entrepreneurial journey starts and they take it forward, everything comes in place and they are able to get the benefit of what they are doing at the best. Next one is the non-availability of infrastructural facility. Like where I talk about, when I tell about this infrastructure here, let me just talk about the word called as licenses, machinery, finances, and the factor. Now, this is where I want to focus in terms of infrastructure. When we talk about this licensing, of course, India has come a long way when we are talking about this license Raj and other factors. Now we have been able to come to that level where almost every single documentation can be done through the e-way, that is the digital method altogether. But still, one thing that lacks in our mind, that lacks in our thought process is that how are we going to revisit the entire entity, revisit the entire system altogether? Which means to say that if today we are going to come to a stage like Norway, like Finland, and all those kind of countries where the ease to start business is in a couple of days, or even sometimes they are able to open it within 24 hours. We need to reach that level. Why? Because that is where the push for starting the business really gets even more enthusiastic. People feel that that's how, if I get the finance immediately, if I get the license immediately, if I get the machinery and the respective factors immediately, then I would be able to move forward. I would be able to think in terms of how to take the business to the next level. Secondly, the government should also assist the entrepreneurs with respect to marketing of the products. And that is a fundamental aspect, as I was talking about in the previous slide also. When we talk about this marketing aspect, the government needs to create a platform for them. Nowadays, when we talk about the setting up of an expo fair, or when we talk about the kind of open fairs where we try to bring in new products, new innovation, this has slowly started setting up a trend altogether. We want this to become like the Dubai Shopping Festival kind of thing, or the Dubai Expo fairs, where you would see that the entrepreneurs get a bigger platform to display the products. The entrepreneurs get a chance to compete with the well-known brands and find where exactly they stand with their product and innovation. That would actually make a very big push for the entrepreneurial journey to succeed. Followed by the extension of entrepreneurial training program. So how are we going to take forward the entrepreneurial journey program? Following suggestions should be accepted as an extension of the entrepreneurial training program. What is the suggestion that we are trying to make is that the entrepreneurial training program executed by the state, central government and various other forms should be adequately improved and extended so that the entrepreneurs are able to operate successfully and they are able to expand their activities. Now, what we are trying to request the government, both in the central as well as the state and the local government, is that we want the entrepreneurial program to be adequately supported and extended. It needs to be improved in the sense you need to start making the interesting factors of the entrepreneurial training program so that everybody participates, everybody's queries are attended, accepted, understood, and they are given a proper solution. Now, for people who are coming from the rural sector, they might not understand the nuances of a city living and what are all the challenges. Now, when I want to go back to my village and I want to concentrate on my horticulture or agriculture related business, I may not get an exact solution because most of the trainers who come for this kind of program do not understand the challenges of the entrepreneurship in terms of agriculture. So what happens to the program is that they get somewhere delineated. They get compared somewhere on the demotivation line altogether. And somewhere I feel that there is a strong disconnect in terms of the training and the actualization. So I would like to say that the training needs to be even more improvised. The training needs to be even more stronger so that we are able to proceed further. Followed by the extension of entrepreneurial training program, which needs to be continuous in nature. We want this program to be a continuous process where we educate the unemployed persons, technically qualified person, and they should be attracted towards these programs by providing them a suitable incentive. Now, nobody is going to learn just because you have put a banner and you have said that there is a training program happening. People will be interested to be a part of your training program unless and until there is some incentive, there is some meaning, there is some benefit behind it. So what are we doing to create that benefit? What are we doing to make the program even more exciting? In all those factors, then we need to start thinking, what are we exactly doing to make the program even more effective? So when you're going to attract the youth from different parts of the country, from different factors of the country, you need to understand that they are not going to come in just like that. They want some sort of incentives to be promoted, which will make them to be a part of the program. It can be in terms of the fees, it can be in terms of some support, it can be in terms of some financial activity or some marketing or some further hand-holding exercises that will make the entire exercise even more interesting. Followed by the short-term refresher courses should also be organized from time to time for earlier trained entrepreneurs to solve their specific problems. Now, this is very, very important. You bring in people who are already involved in the industry, who are already working, who are already running their enterprise. Please do not bring trainers who just will come and run through the syllabus. That will not give a meaning, that will not give a solution to the entrepreneurs. They want people who are already there, who are ready to help them, who are ready to tell them where exactly the problem is and how can we solve the problem. You cannot just go back and tell people that yes, it is done, it is over. You need them to come forward, solve the problem, tell them that this is exactly you need to do, this is how you need to modulate, this is how you need to facilitate the entire business. Followed by the encouragement to research and investigation. I would always say that research and investigation are two factors that has to be given the topmost priority in our country. Fortunately or unfortunately, this topic of research in India is always spoken at a smaller factor, at a smaller level altogether. Why? Because we feel that research is more theoretical, research is more bookish in nature, research is only for the people who are involved in just teaching or in some other theoretical services. But the research concept in India has to be more practical. Research concept in India has to be a system that can be put in practice. So that's where you can improve the concept of research. What we want research and investigation to do is that you need to put the ideology to the table where that can be implemented by the entrepreneur. Now, when you write a paper or when you write a suggestion through a book or through an article, most of the time that article or that paper just remains there and it gets published in some of the journals. That's good enough for the person who's writing it. But what about the ideology, the content of the article getting into a practical implementation? That we have never seen. That is why I say that the service conditions of scientists and specialists should be made more attractive, where their ideas will become the starting point for an entrepreneur to practice. Nowadays, we are talking about electric vehicles, solar energy, or we are talking about the non-conventional factors of energy transformations altogether. But what is more interesting is that how are you going to make the non-conventional ideas or the suggestions more effective? How are you going to take it forward? What is the reason behind moving ourselves from a conventional energy source to a non-conventional point? Now, all those kind of things will be inspired, will be spoken only when the research is actually put into practice. So that is why when you start looking into the foreign countries, or when you start looking into those major developed organizations and countries, what they have done is that they have given more priority to research, and they have been able to attract the best minds in the country to put forward their technological progress. The same thing has to happen in India. We want the scientists, we want the best minds in the respective sectors to come forward with good incentives given to them so that they can help us in terms of promoting the entrepreneurship journey. Followed by development of public enterprises and the managerial efficiency. The government itself should come forward, establish industries in public sector in the field areas in which private industrialists are not taking interest. Now, this is quite important. Why? Because if you look from the private perspective, private angle altogether, the private sector comprises of people who are profit makers because they don't see anything else other than profit. They select certain areas, they select certain factors where there is maximum profit, where there is maximum growth. They don't go beyond it because they don't feel that that is worth enough even talking about it. So in the long run, what happens is that they start understanding this very, very clearly. They feel that, okay, we will just work on these sectors. Probably the other ideas which have been spoken up by the entrepreneurs are not exciting. So they don't promote people who come with ideas in that respective sector. Automatically, for an entrepreneur who is not in the radar of the private interest, gets demotivated. So now it is the responsibility of the government to come forward and take up those sectors where there is a possibility of growth. So that's why I say that the government inclusion in every activity is mandatory. You cannot avoid them. You cannot say that government inclusion is not, we can just go on a privatization mode altogether. You need the government to be. That's why I say that we need to be a public-private partnership always. The PPP model has to be there in order to promote the entrepreneurial journey. The next thing is that the government role in public sector has to be active enough so that they are able to promote large-scale entrepreneurship and they are able to promote a large-scale support altogether to these young entrepreneurs. Followed by improvements in terms of managerial education and training arrangements. This is also quite important. Why? Because when you start thinking about this in accordance to the requirements of the present day business, the most important thing is the managerial education, which needs to be given in proper sense, in proper quarters. Why? Because if you don't understand the administrative part, if you don't understand the managerial efficiency part, there is no point in running a business. The business will become even more effective to all of us only when we start taking this journey seriously. So which means a formal training in the management part, in the administration side, understanding on the present day business factors, all these things have to be enabled to the entrepreneurship. I would say a very simple example here, enabling the entrepreneurs with the Microsoft Office training program, which will talk about Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, because these are certain small things that will actually help them to run the office efficiently. Many of the entrepreneurs fail to understand these kind of small technologies because they feel that that is not their cup of tea. Let me just outsource it. Let me just hire a system administrator. He might probably work for me. But what I would suggest is that if you're looking for a one-man company, if you're just starting up something new and you want to run the business efficiently, automate your process, then probably a Microsoft Office training would prove even more efficient and you will be able to get better success. So that's why this managerial education and training is mandatory. Followed by the law and provisions altogether. The legal provision prescribed for establishment and control on business industries is also important. It is very, very important. Why? Because they are quite complicated and rigid and they are not conducive for the entrepreneurship development program. That is, if you start seeing that there are a lot of rules and regulations which prevent people in terms of starting up a business, there are terms and conditions which actually make the entrepreneur take a step back. So what we suggest is that for the factors of entrepreneurial journey to be even more successful, even more simple in nature, the legal solutions have to be made simplified. They have to attract, they have to encourage the entrepreneurs. They should not be complicated. They should not be something which drives the entrepreneurs away. So that's why I always say that take time in terms of making rules and regulations simpler so that they will be attractive enough in nature. They will be in a position to conduct the business even more better. Followed by the publicity and dissemination of entrepreneurship literature. Now, what is this? Is that if you start looking into the documents, if you start looking into the literature that needs to be incorporated of the successful entrepreneurs, narrating their experiences, functional activities, incentives, all those things should happen on a regular basis. Why this is important? Just let's have a look into it. India is a nation that is news frenzy. We are people who love to listen to news every single minute, every single hour as far as possible. And we are a country which is highly exposed in terms of the social media patterns altogether. So using that social media, instead of spreading politics or hatredness or trying to create confusion, why don't we try to promote the success stories of these entrepreneurs, which can be a motivation for the young entrepreneurs? Now, when you start looking into the advertisements of White Hat Junior coming up on your television screens, you see those young kids who have been able to transform a simple subject into a very beautiful program-based model altogether. Somebody is able to use music and combine it with mathematics and start coming up with a program. Somebody is able to create a new kind of system to learn science. So when we can see this kind of young entrepreneur minds who are able to transform the entire country, why don't we use the social media and the news channels more to promote this entrepreneurial success? That will be a very big modulation. That would be a very big change that we would be bringing into the country. That would make the learning, that would make the attraction towards the programs a bigger success. Moving further, regularly publicize. The programs and thought process have to be continuously through the radio, television, and other mediums of publicity. Now, one side, when we are talking about this radio, medias, and other publicity, the other side we also need to talk about is the OTT. That is, when I talk about the platforms like Amazon Prime or Netflix and kind of OTT areas. Why? Because these are the factors, these are the channels where millions of viewers are today looking into it. So when you can bring up a stand-up comedy show there, why don't you bring up a stand-up on in terms of the entrepreneurial factors? Why don't we start something like the TEDx channel through the OTT platforms, which can be regularly shown to the people, which can be regularly given as an exercise in schools and colleges, which will make the entrepreneurial journey even more successful. So every part of the week, at least 3 or 4 days in a week, you can have somebody talking about it, telling about their journey, telling about their success, which will make the system even more attractive. Followed by more cooperative. The government departments, we feel that is always something like a cold shoulder. They don't want to support us. They don't want to give loans. They don't want to provide any kind of basic platform. What we want the government is that to become more responsible enough in terms of participating in each of the program, in each of the activity, so that we see that the entrepreneurial journey or the success is even more powerful. Now, sometimes you might feel that the government is only trying to create programs namesake and float it. But you don't find that the government itself is participating in that. The government comes with a very nice program saying that and development program for MSME. The government comes with an incentive, government comes with a financing program. But is it true? Is it happening? Now, when you talk about a healthcare program or an agriculture program or an education technology program or a fintech program, is this where you see that government also participate and conducts the program? If that would be the factor, then what we want is that the government to come forward and be a part of the training, and each and every word that is spoken through that training program should be enacted. That is where the training will become even more effective, and people will believe that yes, what has been taken up by us, the government is standing with us in terms of promoting it. So that is why this is very, very important, where we want the government to become more cooperative. Followed by the favorable laws, the administrative rules, laws and policies should be logical, rational and practical. Law has always been understood as something, as a preventive care altogether, but we want the law to be encouraging altogether. We want it to be like an encouragement platform. We want people to understand law to be simplified. We don't want it to be complicated. We don't want it to be one-sided. We want the law to be just and fair for all, so that you are able to take the entrepreneurial journey to the next level. The other suggestions where we have always listed out is the strong capital and money market should be developed. Why? Because that is the basic level for any of the funding activities or the elements to move forward. So if you don't have a strong capital market, you don't have a strong platform to fund, then automatically the entrepreneurial journey comes down. Cooperation, coordination between public and private sectors, as I have spoken about the PPP model, the public-private partnership, this has to be promoted everywhere. In fact, if you look at the success stories of the Delhi Metro, the Bangalore Metro, the Chennai Metros, or the international airports that have been created in India, they've all been a successive story because of this kind of model that came up. So definitely this journey has to continue. This association has to continue in order to promote successful entrepreneurship, followed by the tax structure that needs to be made favorable for the entrepreneurs. Because if the tax structure is going to be too much heavier, or it is going to be a burden for the players, then automatically people will go away from entrepreneurship. The effort should be made to maintain economic stability of the country. We expect and we hope that entrepreneurship should be a promotional activity to bring in economic balance. It should help us to grow. It should not be something where it starts creating an instability altogether. And desired improvement should be made with the economic policies trying to concentrate on entrepreneurship. The other success factors or suggestions is that we need to first understand the efforts that are made for the social, cultural and ideological shift. We also need that every individual is given the rights in terms of profit should be secured. Special concession should be provided, especially from the rural sector, and the foreign investors and non-resident Indian should be attracted, because they are the people who have better finances and they can provide finances. They can involve themselves in this journey. They can also become financial partners in terms of bringing this journey forward. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the suggestions that have been spoken through this session will be of a great help and resource to you. In the upcoming sessions, we shall be seeing more about our EDP programs. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.